Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome. Can you hear me? Rubiat, can you hear me? You can hear me? Thank you. Yes, good morning and welcome. All protocols are hereby observed. My name is Leti Tembolongwe. I just want to say that IPSS is really happy to partner with the University of Justo on its project Tuning Higher Education for Africa's Peace and Security. In his quest to contribute and support the harmonization of higher education programs and the creation of a revitalized, distinctive, attractive, and globally competitive African higher education space through collaborations with different partners. This also falls within one of our core 3 pillars that our institute focuses on. And yes, indeed, the African Union, as well as other actors, depend on academic institutions to cultivate and produce future experts and leaders that will be able to tackle the many challenges facing the continent today, including those in the areas of peace and security. Moving forward, we hope today's conference will provide a timely opportunity for consultative dialogue, which will lead to setting the scene for progressions toward mutually defined templates for degree profiles. Today's conference will also provide us an opportunity to learn more about the project, its objectives, opportunities, and challenges, if any. So without wasting much time, I would like to wish all speakers and participants fruitful discussions, and we look forward to the actionable recommendations that will come from the conference. I thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Hello. 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 This is the commissioner using Utibe Abbasi's ACN's camera. Hello.
I propose that Dr. Alex, you can give your welcome remarks because I can't see Dr. Jonas yet, who's going to be our moderator. So you can go ahead and give your opening remarks. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Leti. And good morning to all of you. This is Alex Rayon, the Vice Rector for International Relations at the University of Deusto. First of all, I would like, obviously, to thank you all for organizing this this really amazing and promising activity in order to start discussing what is going to be for us also a challenging project.
No, because it is registered under your name.
Sorry? Okay. I think that it's going to be something quite challenging for us since we know that peace and security studies is quite a critical issue for all the continent, and we know because we have been working on it for some years, and we know it because, as you may know, our university is quite engaged with that knowledge area, and we know it because we have been working with some African institutions in order to get to that point in terms of the comparability, for the compatibility, and for the harmonization of peace and security studies. So thank you for Institutes for Peace and Security Studies for calling us, for inviting us, and thank you to all you distinguished participants to be here with us today and to join us. Afterwards, I will be explaining our specific institution with our specific role. So I wouldn't like to take more time here just introducing this event. Thank you, and please be very welcome. And I give the floor back to Letty.
Thank you so much. Dr. Jonas is still not yet here. I think let's just follow the agenda of who's next on the agenda. You can just take the floor and give your presentation. Thank you.
Hello? Let's see, can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
This is the commissioner. Please, can you release the camera for me to speak? I'm using Utibe's Essence camera. Can I go on? And my own is not coming.
Your Excellency, please go ahead.
But I'm not seeing the camera. You want me to go ahead without the camera?
You can put on your camera. Just switch it on.
And you are not releasing it. I'm using Utibe's Essence. I'm using my administrative officer's camera, laptop.
Just switch on the video. It should come on.
I have been switching on more than 5 minutes ago.
Okay, we'll try with our IT from this end as well, but you can go on, Your Excellency.
Okay. I'm the Director, Institute of Peace and Security Studies at Addis Ababa, the representative of the EU delegation to the African Union. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I have the greatest honor of welcoming you to this conference, jointly hosted by the Institute of Peace and Security Studies and the University of Deutsche on tuning higher education for Africa's peace and security agenda. Due to the challenges of COVID-19, we are unable to meet physically, but the advancement in technology has provided us an opportunity to carry on our business virtually. I hope you and your family are doing quite well, despite the unprecedented times we find ourselves. I congratulate the organizers for having brought together experts, relevant stakeholders, and policymakers, and also for their work on peace and security studies in general, and the concerted effort at building a community of experts focused on harmonizing and standardizing degrees that offers peace or security studies on the continent, which forms the basis of our discussions here today. Ladies and gentlemen, the vision of the African Union is that of a peaceful, integrated, prosperous Africa, driven by its own competent citizen, representing a dynamic force in the global arena. Aspiration 4 of the Agenda 2063 emphasizes that the culture of peace and tolerance shall be nurtured in Africa's citizenry through peace education. The Continental Education Strategy for Africa 2016-2025 calls for peace education and safeguarding education in times of emergency and ensuring safe teaching and learning environments. The strategy recognizes that peace building will not be sustainable if the efforts are not mainstreamed in education and implanted in the minds of our citizenry. Africa desires for shared prosperity and well-being, for unity and integration, for a continent of free citizens and expanded horizons where the full potential of all of its citizens are realized, and with freedom from fear, freedom from disease and want, which could only be achieved by ensuring that education plays its role as a key agent for sustainable peace. As education is the key tool to nurture compassion, empathy for others, and learning to live together. We also know that experience sharing and dialogue are crucial components of all peace building efforts. It is for this reason that this consultation and experience sharing conference has high value in complementing and advancing our collective efforts in peace building towards the Africa we want. With education as a key platform for peace building, all actors play an imperative role in transforming the minds of young people and developing curricula that address the challenges posed. Africa is the most youthful continent, with 70% of the population under 35 years of age, and will continue to be so for another decade or two. This offers the continent a unique opportunity to leverage its economic, social, and political development in order to realize the demographic dividends. Their demographic dividend discourse calls for improved access to quality education and skills development, employment and entrepreneurship, access to health information and services in a peaceful environment guided by good governance. It is in pursuit of this vision of an integrated Africa that the African Union Commission has embarked on developing a strategy for harmonization of higher education programs in Africa in order to foster cooperation in information exchange, harmonization of procedures and policies, and attainment of comparability of qualifications in order to facilitate mobility of Africans across African countries and beyond for employment and further study. Investing in education and skills is a key focus of the African Union, and it underlines the importance of higher education to build skills and create jobs. In an increasingly dynamic world that we are in today, it is imperative that collaborative processes of reviewing and modernizing competencies and skills, making curricula and teaching more relevant to the needs of African societies and the labor market are adopted. Harmonization of higher education in Africa is considered particularly important to boost mobility and to increase the quality of education and comparability. These are undoubtedly key goals of the Tuning Project, for which considerations of peace and security agenda must be part. The African Union Commission is also in the process of developing the African Continental Qualification Framework, which will further enhance comparability, quality, and transparency of qualifications from all subsectors and levels of education and training, and support people's lifelong learning outcomes. In conclusion, let me reaffirm that the African Union Commission remains fully committed to peace and security education in general, more especially on our Tuning Higher Education Initiative in collaboration with the European Union, which work towards the harmonization of curriculum and students' competencies in a wide range of fields. We are particularly excited about efforts such as this to include other important subject areas, particularly because this year's theme of the African Union is silencing the guns and creating a conducive environment. With this, I wish us success in our deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for that very useful presentation, giving us an outline on what the African Union has been working on in as far as higher education is concerned, but also the vision for the future. We hope to hear more about this in the follow-up session. I think at this juncture, we can have Your Excellency Professor Cheryl Hendricks and Professor Sergio in the roundup as speakers. Your Excellency, you have the floor again. Your Excellency? Hello, Your Excellency, can you hear me? Professor Cheryl Hendricks, you can go ahead with your presentation until we get hold of Your Excellency. Thank you. Professor Cheryl Hendricks, you can go ahead with your presentation, please. Okay, shall we then start with Professor Sergio? Please go ahead with your presentation.
Hi, good morning to all of you. Hello. I would start with my presentation if you wish so, but I think that probably could be more fruitful if I'm able to present after Alex Ryan could give the portrait of the university and tuning methodology, because probably I'm going to try to link some of the things that we are doing in Deutsche precisely with this tuning methodology. So if you don't mind, in order to follow the coherent structure, I think of my presentation, I think it would be better to follow the this sort of schedule. But as you wish. I mean, let me know, Letty, what do you prefer?
The overview. Yeah, just go ahead and give us the overview, please. Thank you.
Okay, then. I mean, what I wanted to present today, it is what we are doing in Deutsche in terms of peace and security. So I'm going to share my screen. Yeah. So I guess that you are able to see my presentation, my screen. What I would like to present to you all this morning is what we are doing here in Deutsche in terms of peace and security. So kind of Deutsche experience or expertise in this field, as well as some of the remarks of how we do it and what we could deliver, and some of the impacts and results that we're expecting that could generate, right? So let me, even if, as I said before, I think that Alex is going to, our vice rector, it is going to give us the big picture or a more comprehensive perspective of our institution. Let me just focus on some of the products or specific aspects that we are dealing with in Deutsche, right? So just to have some elements, even more, but I would like to share with you some of the most relevant ones. One of them, it is our joint master program in international humanitarian action, NOAA, which is a very prestigious one, and it has been working for many, many years, starting in 1993. But apart from teaching and mobility students and staff, and the possibility to to dig into the international humanitarian action, it also works as a network of 26 universities all over the world. And for sure, Africa, or the African continent, it is one of the priorities, and it would be interesting to explore the possibility to have a higher presence in the continent, right? Other product that we are offering here in Deutsche University is our degree in international relations, where we have plenty of courses and subjects dealing with peace and security. I will explain afterwards how we tackle it, but we have from security and defense, to conflict and peace studies. So we have different classes where our students and incoming students, they have the possibility to deal with security and peace realms, right? Apart from that, and I insist, I don't want to make a very long enumeration of different projects, but I think that those are the most relevant ones. We're starting with a master's degree in international relations and business diplomacy. Indeed, we are launching this project this September, where we are focusing on business diplomacy, but at the same time, we're analyzing geopolitical risk and the environment where business, where trade is made in the international arena. So peace and security, stability, and a broader perspective and interpretation of security is understood here in order to understand, in order to know or to interpret how business should be done in order to generate development at the very end, right? Apart from that, we have also a very prestigious and well-known Institute for Human Rights, where plenty of publications and research projects are done and are elaborated every year with, and I will mention something else afterwards regarding publications, but I think that it is also a sort of hub where many aspects or many research are done. Researches are done in Deutsche University. Finally, just to mention a couple of them, a couple of elements more. We have also a research team, an emerging incipient research team on international relations and multidimensional security, which I'm leading indeed, and we are already doing some research project on new threats, sometimes regarding regional scope. In Latin America and Europe, so it would be great to focus even more in Africa. Or we are dealing also with with migrations or security within borderlands and how it has an impact on people who is living in those borderlands, right? So once again, in this case, regarding the research dimension, we are dealing with this peace and security aspects. And finally, we are these days we're about to sign a bilateral agreement with Spain's Ministry of Defense. We have always worked with them, but we are about to sign this bilateral agreement, which is going to enable us to develop more workshops, projects, publications, and links between this official institution and us. And also, it is going to foster and reinforce our dimension or our peace and security dimension. So this is just an appetizer of some of the things that we're doing here in Deutsche. How we do it? First of all, we're doing according to tuning methodology. Rather than explaining myself, I will give the opportunity to Alex Rayon to mention it afterwards, because he knows with more detail all the different aspects. But it is important to know that we are developing this kind of harmonization between the different units and the different products. So all the things that we are delivering in certain way, they have an internal coherence and they work well properly in that sense. How we do it also, more in more theoretical aspects, we are adopting a critical security studies. I'm not going to enter into a theoretical framework, but for us, it is very important to see that we are overcoming the more orthodox approaches that are rather narrow, in the sense that talking about peace and security just in terms of a national basis, so a very state-centric perspective, and also focusing mainly on order and defense and sovereignty, right? For us, it is a more comprehensive approach, and here I mentioned human security approach, which was, as we all know, developed mainly since the 90s, thanks to the UNDP report. And we try to make it more, to make it broader, to open it to more elements horizontally and vertically. That means that rather than talking about state or sovereign material security, we're also talking about human security mainly, So regarding health issues, regarding environmental issues, development, socioeconomic aspects, and so on. And also vertically, because it is not just about the state, it is also about supranational institutions and international fora above, and also below, the idea of communities, human beings as the main reference when dealing with security in accordance with Agenda 2063, right? And finally, how we do it, it is not just for the sake of studying these peace and security aspects, it is also because we are trying to change, to transform, to have a social impact. Our motto here in the Deutsche strategic plan that we have elaborated for 2022, it is indeed transforming our world together. And here we are doing all these things, thinking critically and trying to transform and to have an impact on the world, right? So that's the main goal of all of our efforts, right? What we could deliver, so how we could collaborate or try to put something else to add some of our expertise, as I was mentioning before. We have different possibility. Let me just focus a little bit on the first one, the so-called initial consultative workshop. So this is something that could be organized, could be done together with the IPSS, and just as once again as a first step towards this sort of harmonization according to tuning methodology, right? So this is just a sort of example of how this credit, these 30 hours could be done. Well, in these days, logically, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we have been able to transform or to move to this remote attendance learning methodology to make things easier and to be able to work on one hand in synchro or throughout synchronous classes, and also at the same time, thanks to this internet or virtual tools, so people could have some pre-work. It could have some loads of work in advance, as well as post-work. So some of the assessments or reflections or other kind of things could be done afterwards, right? So if there is any question afterward, I could develop in depth this sort of proposal. But the most important thing here, it is that, and I will go back to that in a couple of minutes, is that it is a virtual classroom which is going to be tutorized by professors, sure, but at the same time we are fostering teamwork, problem-based learning, and case learning methodology, right? It has to be very well applied knowledge, right? So it could be useful for the students who are following this. Apart from this, so apart from the initial consultative workshop, what we could deliver for sure it is staffs and students mobility. This is one of the Deutsche's main feature. We are a very internationalized university with plenty of mobility, and we professors, but also our students, they are very used to move from one place to the other. We think that we are starting from here, from Bilbao and San Sebastian, but we are able to jump all over the world, and in this case, all over Africa. And for us, staff mobility and students mobility, it is fundamental. As the commissioner has mentioned previously, mobility is also key, and I think that could be one of the things that we could remark in terms of our collaboration. Also, as I have mentioned before, we're always thinking or foreseeing what could be the main degrees or what could be those realms where there is an increasing demand from the society. So hypothetical joint degrees also could be a possibility. We are offering new degrees or master degrees almost each year. So trying to find out a good partner and a good collaboration could be very, very fruitful. So something that we could study or explore the possibility for sure further collaboration for research project and publications. I have already mentioned how we have plenty of research initiative, and some of our publications are very well indexed in the most relevant rankings. So once again, to try to know each other and to, as I mentioned over there, to develop closer ties with other partners and foster this friendly and fruitful environment. Research work could be a very, very desirable opportunity. Finally, let me finish with the impact and results. What we are doing, or what we are expecting to do, it is to put upon the table applied learning and practical knowledge, right? So when I mention putting tuning methodology into practice, it is not about talking in abstract about what we could do. It's just by doing it that we will be able to work together, that we could be able to transform the society, as we have mentioned. So it is learning by doing things. So it is applied learning and practical knowledge, right? Indeed, all these efforts would be able to increase our possibilities to convert towards tuning methodology as the way to, as a pattern that could enable us to work together following a specific structure and coherence when dealing with peace and security. And I think that could enable us to, well, to follow the same argument, or to be able to understand how we are doing things, instead of trying to, well, to make different incoherent initiatives that for sure nobody would like to do, right? Just to finish with a couple of ideas. Once again, I would like to emphasize how mutual trust and fruitful environment for collaboration could be developed mainly through this, as I mentioned before, teaching or staff mobility, research, publications, students. We have realized that when we are able to generate this kind of confidence and interlink with our different partners, it is going to be easier to be able to work together and to develop further initiatives. So I think that could be the better way to start, the first step to generate this environment. And finally, once again, to repeat or to sum up some of the ideas that I have mentioned, in order to foster harmonization of higher education programs, the best way the best thing that we can do is to do it, right? So we have to start by doing it, and to be able to share all our knowledge and expertise in terms of peace and security. And I think that here in Deutsche we have been able to, well, to do it, and we are willing to keep on collaborating, and also willing to know more about this. That's all. If there is any question that I will be willing to answer it, or to enter into any kind of discussion on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Sergio, for giving us more details on the project. I don't know if Professor Alex, you'd like to add on to that presentation before I ask Professor Hendricks, who's just joined us to give a presentation.
Thank you. And first of all, congratulations, Sergio. No, I think it's better to give the floor to Ms. Hendricks, and I will be giving my presentation a little bit later.
Thank you so much. Professor Hendricks, I know you've just joined, but you're most welcome. I'm very sorry that there was a confusion here with the timing, but we're glad you managed to join us on time. And I just received a call from Dr. Jonas with apologies. He was called in for an urgent meeting at the government offices, but he'll be able to join us within the next 10 minutes. So apologies from Dr. Jonas. But Professor Hendricks, you have the floor, please. Thank you.
Professor Hendricks, we do not hear you, sorry. I think that your micro is muted.
Just unmute yourself, Professor Hendricks. Thank you.
Sorry about that, and sorry for all the confusion, but glad to be here and to have the opportunity to share some thoughts on tuning higher education for Africa. Peace and security agenda. I think we're obviously raising this because we believe that more can be done by the higher education sector to assist with the implementation of Africa's peace and security agenda. And from the concept note, I gather that the focus is on harmonization and coordination of what is being taught, and then to do a mapping exercise in line with the guiding principle of CISA. But CISA also then places emphasis on peace and security and calls for conflict prevention and conflict resolution to be mainstreamed into our education system. But I think an a priori question is, what is the link between what, who, and how we teach in the delivery of actual peace and security? Or alternatively, what is our role as lecturers or trainers or researchers on delivering on a continental peace and security agenda? And how should we be doing this? Because this will inform how we harmonize a curriculum. And there's obviously a very varied response to this, depending on what you see the role of a university or what the role of an academic. Is it maintaining independence? Is it retaining critical thinking, theorizing, etc.? Or is it getting involved in policy making and policy implementation? And to be a more engaged or activist scholar that uses scholarship to make a difference and an impact. So we mustn't assume that everybody in Africa teaching peace and security is on the same page in relation to this, I think is the first point that I'd like to make. I'd also like to make a point that last year, I tried to engage in a mapping exercise of what was being taught in relation to peace and security on this continent, and it was extremely difficult to get information on this. The little bit that I got from people who sent me their course outlines, etc., was that there's a lot being taught, but it's quite haphazard. There seems to be a sustained focus on peace and security only in a few centers and institutes. The others are teaching one or two courses in relation to this. So I think I appreciate that this forum is trying to embark upon this particular exercise, but I want to pose the question, is this all that we want to do or need to do here? I want to raise the issue of the limitations and divisions of where we're located, and that needs to be bridged first. And then I want to say, how did we make a contribution to the peace and security agenda in the past? So what kinds of questions is it that we need to be asking ourselves here? For the most part, as we all know, peace and security at universities in particular is located in either political studies, IR, or strategic studies. And these disciplines, I think, remain Eurocentric and wedded to ideas, systems, structures, and processes of yesteryear. And they are currently unable to chart new pathways for peace and security. Then there's a plethora of these centers and institutes, either within universities or attached to government departments or independent. And here's where the new ideas, I think, are being generated because they have more hands-on experience and interaction. The only challenge is that there's a division of labor where academia is seen as a place of theorization and conceptualization, and trainers and the research institutes are more of the problem-oriented engagers. And the value is very different on what we place on these two things. So how then do we bring these varied institutions closer together to achieve this kind of harmonization of the curriculum? How do we align their work, and can their work actually be aligned? They're not targeting the same audiences and they require different syllabi. There's a lot of gatekeeping and turf wars in the space of peace and security on this continent. So very few trusted academics get sufficient access to either the African Union or broader peace and security forums to engage here. So we need to break those silos, I think, first and foremost here. For me, harmonization is not so much in the names of courses, introductory course on peacekeeping, etc. It is in the content that we need to look, that our approach is going to be what is important. So we cannot simply, and I'm just using the African context because it's one that I'm most familiar with, we're teaching about APSA or AGA or early warning or mediation or peacekeeping. We must think through anew about the state, about governance, about violent extremism, about the monopoly of the means of violence, new forms of conflict management. And we must do so from the vantage point of our own struggles and our own experiences, so that we don't keep repeating the largely outmoded theories and concepts in our academic spaces. We must take more effort in investing in critical and alternative thinking and not merely assisting with implementation. So that, I think, was the first point I wanted to make. I think if we just glance at the websites of our universities to see the wide variety of courses on offer, that they are targeting a broad range of learners here: students, policymakers, practitioners, civil society, security sector personnel, parliamentarians, etc. This space has grown exponentially on this particular continent. And what is being taught also then differs from a continued fixation of giving our students a deep familiarity with World War I and World War II and the UN system, to those concentrating on case studies of conflicts, theorizing about conflict resolution, what is peace and security, security sector governance, gender, peace and security, etc. Courses cover the basics. I think we're covering the basics here in terms of concepts, theories, methodologies, etc. There's no shortage of courses and centers. So what exactly then is the problem that we are trying to address? And how will a harmonized curriculum assist with this, with whatever challenge it is we're identifying? And I'm afraid that I missed the beginning, so I don't quite get that. It is our approach, I think. If our approaches to the subject matter remain the same as 20 years ago, producing students that really cannot make a meaningful impact in bettering the lives of the people of this continent. The peace agenda that we are working with was developed in 1992, and we merely swing in terms of our focus on it, from peacekeeping to peace building to now conflict prevention. We're not asking what a new peace agenda in the current conflict context should entail. And so when we teach, we inculcate norms, we inculcate values and ethics and ways of seeing the world. So who teaches, how we teach, and who we bring into the classroom to learn together is very important. If we to generate African-centered knowledge and peace and security, this becomes all the more so. How do we tell the story of peace and security from a different vantage point? How do we shape new discourses on peace and security? I think there is the big question. What is the big question we are trying to answer when it comes to peace and security studies? And how then can we evolve into an epistemic community and organize ourselves to answer these particular questions? And we did so in the past, in the 1990s, and early till around 2010, I think, there was a very dynamic interrelationship between academia, policymakers, and practitioners that filtered into our curriculum. And so how do we get back to that kind of mutuality that existed there? Because this is no longer the case. I think the Kana Forum comes closest to what I'm speaking about here, but it's not sufficient. I think by way of conclusion, we have the scholarship, we have the policies and frameworks and the architectures. There's a busyness around peace and security, but we're not reaching the promised land because we need to be asking slightly different questions here. So for me, it's the interaction that is needed. We need to go beyond, I guess what I'm saying, beyond harmonization to look at critical content. We need to reorganize ourselves so that we can form this epistemic community that can be of more assistance to the implementation of a new peace agenda, I think, and mobilize our students and other lecturers, etc., to deliver on this. Yes, peace education, yes, conflict prevention is important to mainstream throughout our education system, but clearly with a different approach to this. So thank you. I'm going to end there.
Thank you so much, Professor Hendricks. And I see that Dr. Jonas has just joined us. Dr. Jonas, I conveyed your apologies to the group. I think you can now take on with the moderation. But just to give you a brief outline, we had a presentation, an address, the opening address from Her Excellency, the Commissioner of Human Resources and Technology, who gave us a very clear outline on what the African Union has been working on and is focusing on as far as the topic is concerned. And then we also had a detailed outline of the project by Professor Sergio, which now gives us a clear idea what this project intends to produce in the coming months. And you've just heard a brief of the presentation by Professor Hendricks, but you can now take the floor. We still have Professor Alex to give his presentation, and possibly I don't know if Her Excellency has still wants to contribute more to the presentation that she gave us earlier. Dr. Jonas, you have
of course, because the first one was an opening remark, then the second one was to speak to the subject.
You have the floor, Your Excellency.
So, okay, thank you. Dr. Jonas, it's good to see you. I want to extend sincere gratitude to Professor Sergio Caballero Santos and Professor Cheryl Hendricks for the insights they gave during their presentation. And the topic itself, tuning higher education for Africa's peace and security, agenda, is very topical, contemporary, and very essential, particularly if you have looked at the three themes of the African Union that we've had in 2018, 2019, and 2020, where in 2019, it was the year of refugees, internally displaced persons, and returnees. And then in 2020, it is still silencing the guns, creating a conducive environment. So it is for this reason that I welcome this particular webinar. Africa is ushering into an era that most observers and pundits are predicting will determine its destiny as a continent of the future. But to fulfill this promised bright future, the continent has to come to terms with the challenges of its education and training systems. Professor Sherry Hendricks have underlined the importance of quality education, of curricula, and of what really the content should be when we speak peace and security in our educational agenda. Current education policies and educational systems have not been able to adequately deliver on the promise that they hold of enlightening the general citizenry to uphold peace and security in Africa. And that is why Professor Hendricks said we are yet to reach the promised land. Fostering peace and security in Africa demands a multi-stakeholder approach for which higher education is a key player. Higher education community has a crucial leadership role in research and bringing together major stakeholders in Africa to map out strategies and methodologies, as well as a place for quality education in the promotion of peace and security towards unity and renaissance to achieve Agenda 2063, that vision of an integrated, prosperous, and peaceful Africa, driven by its own competent and skilled citizens able to play in the global arena. Where there is no peace and there is no security, definitely there cannot be sustainable development. Peace and security is a major responsibility for all and demands a multi-stakeholder approach in all interventions. Higher education players and stakeholders are not exempted
from this and do have a major role to play in ensuring peace and security on the continent. And of course, when you look at our higher education curriculum, most often peace and security are actually found in the Department of International Relations and in the Department of Political Science and the Department of History. For the past few decades, there has been a growing concern on the peace and security situation of Africa. This has led to several responses, such as putting in place structures for mediation and conflict resolution. Peace and security carries one of our biggest budgets in the African Union Commission. So, this has led to several policy responses, such as putting in place structures for mediation and conflict resolution, mechanisms for the management of diversity, strengthening governance and democratic principles, and sensitizing the populace on the need to have respect for the rule of law. All these efforts at the national and continental levels are aimed at fast-tracking the realization of a peaceful and secure Africa. As you might already be aware, the operationalization of the Continental Education Strategy for Africa 2016-2025 is being achieved through thematic clusters covering major objective areas such as teacher development, higher education, early childhood education, TVET, STEM education, gender and peace education. The Peace and Education Cluster was launched in 2018, and it incorporates the ADEA Inter-Country Quality Notes in Peace Education. The mandate of this cluster includes, amongst others, assisting in the formulation of national policies and practices in the area of peace education and conflict prevention, training stakeholders as peace actors and mediators, protecting the right and access to education, protecting education facilities against attack and military use, learning lessons, and developing and disseminating materials on peace education, among others. The Continental Education Strategy for Africa, commonly called CESAR 2016-2025, takes cognizance of the need for peace to be embedded in education at all levels. The strategy calls for the promotion of peace education, conflict prevention, and resolution at all levels of education and for all age groups. A major focus on achieving peace and security using education as a tool is the development of policies and plans that are conflict sensitive for education. This approach requires proactiveness for higher education institutions to conduct an audit of our educational system to ensure that the systems are not prone to being drivers of conflict and violence. Peace education has the capacity to transform tertiary institutions and equally make them to respond appropriately to the inculcation of a culture of peace in people. It will aid in the construction of the right frameworks in tertiary educations through values which are based on non-violence, justice, equity, trust, transparency, empathy, compassion, cooperation, and respect for people. By acquiring these values, unacceptable behavior and conduct will be modified to conform to expected societal standards and norms, and ultimately empower youths to develop peaceful attitudes in Africa. I would like to propose that from our primary school, we have what we call moral instructions. And under these subject moral instructions, peoples are taught values of living within the society in a peaceful area. And when you get to secondary school, it is called civic education. So at the university level, we do not have courses that speaks to this, except for students who are in political science or in international relations that will have access to this. But it could become a subject, a module, a compulsory module for all students across the board, irrespective of their specialization at the university. A higher education system, which can be referred to as quality higher education, must entail awareness of the drivers and threats to peace and security, and have adequate systems established to eradicate these threats. Higher education institutions also need to be strengthened to come out with policies and recommendations that address current peace and security concerns on the continent. It is with this backdrop that I am particularly happy that we are having these conversations. Tuning is a collaborative, consultative process involving academics at subject levels, employers, and other stakeholders, with the ultimate purpose of enriching the curriculum so that students have enhanced competencies to meet the emerging challenges and potentials. It promotes the development of learning outcomes for the various degree programs while emphasizing the development of generic and subject level competencies. Tuning in higher education has been successfully completed in over 60 countries around the world. Tuning was launched in 5 subject areas and was open to all degree awarding higher education institutions, each led by a region as follows: medicine, North Africa; teacher education, Southern Africa; agriculture, West Africa; mechanical engineering, Central Africa; and civil engineering, East Africa. Tuning Africa initiative is a project that is fundamentally linked to the recognition of qualifications at national, regional, and continental levels. It uses an internationally established methodology to enhance degree comparability. The processes have been initiated as part of the cooperation in higher education between the African Union and European Union, and is in line with the African Union Commission's harmonization strategy. It is quite encouraging that issues of peace and security are being considered within the tuning process, and it is very, very relevant and right on time. The African Union Strategy for Harmonization of Higher Education incorporates a strong focus on establishing effective quality assurance mechanisms with shared view on quality, common agreed standards, and an equivalent way of assessing equality. Yes, harmonization is found in the content, and we need to integrate different vantage points so that outmoded theories and concepts are not encouraged, as emphasized by Professor Cheryl Hendricks. Yes, how will a harmonized curriculum establish or facilitate the intent of the subject tuning higher education for Africa's peace and security agenda? What is tuning higher education for Africa's peace and security? I look forward to the outcomes of these debates and discussions, and to new partnerships for ensuring that education in general and higher education especially begins to play its role in achieving our desired peace, social economic development, and shared prosperity in ways that are systemic. I hope that this event also creates networks that will continue the exchanges and work together. Now, it is time for all of us together to walk the talk. Go beyond rhetorics with commitment and determination. And once more, congratulations to the organizers, and I hope together we will walk the talk. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much indeed, Excellency. My sincere apologies to distinguished presenters and, of course, guests of honor. I'm absolutely sorry about my being absent at that time. I was called again for almost the same topic. You might, of course, see, I might come time and again, how to walk the talk, because we happen to undergo some difficulties, I'm sure, in a couple of weeks' time, including, of course, shutting down of internets as well. So how to make education work for peace and security. That was the real topic, and I had to be called by the Minister of Peace, so I had to just be late, and my apologies indeed. And I'm so happy at the same time again, education is on the crossroad. I'm absolutely delighted. At the same time, also, I'm rather perplexed when I see the educated were supposed to solve those peace and security problems, or at least social problems, with their PhDs and with their higher level learning. What would you say if they are at the center of the very problem itself? What would you say if our education failed to bring behavioral change, attitudinal change, and engage in social changes? I'm just talking from empirical data, to be honest. I was so happy just to hear the previous speaker and before the last speaker, how our education should be modified, should be up to date, including this violent extremism, not only simply peace education, but what should be included: inclusivity, human value, so essentializing humanity, development oriented, addressing the here and now problem that Africa is facing. But at the same time, the educators themselves being not center for solution, but center for problems as a result of different orientation. To be honest, the common citizens started to ask questions. What is the value of education if it doesn't help you to transcend from your clan thinking, from your tribe thinking, from your political advantage thinking? If it doesn't take you out from that and then make you think more globally and center humanity, respect humanity, they keep on asking those fundamental questions that any education should deliver. And I'm so happy. I can't, to be honest, I can't find excellent phrase to very quickly describe how timely our topic is in Africa today, seriously speaking. So I'm very happy indeed to hear those excellent speeches, and particularly the alignment, specialization across Africa, which part of Africa should focus on what. But my experience in peace and security, particularly my visit to different parts of Asia, particularly South Korea, Japan, and partly, of course, some of the European countries, particularly in Japan, peace education is taken as compulsory course to all departments: engineering, medicine, social sciences, all of them as requirements. So as, because these questions I was asking kept on coming up from people from the grassroots level, then this injection of ethical aspect, the humanistic aspect, the transcendental aspect, from the materialistic aspect to the transcending, to the spiritual aspect, the human values, the moral aspect coming in. And I was so happy when those questions were raised earlier. So may I then, without much ado, once again, I hope you will accept my apologies and then move on to the next speaker to deliver. But even I don't have the list here because I have to leave and then just rushing here so as to see your faces. Once again, if you accepted my apologies, then can I just call upon the next speaker with love and respect? Hello? Is Letty there? Hello, Letty?
Yes, Professor Alex, if you can go ahead, please. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much for giving me the floor. And first of all, I would like to greet all you again, and thank you to not only the African Union, but also the Institute for Peace and Security Studies, Dr. Jonas Adaye, for this wonderful organization and for giving us the opportunity to not only to take part in this event, but also to start discussing such a promising issue, such as the agenda and the curriculum development in peace and security. So I would like to just share with you the slides I have prepared in order to be discussing how we can move ahead. As Dr. Utibe Abasi Essien mentioned before, we need to go beyond commitment. We need to move ahead, and we need to start discussing specific steps that we should be doing in order to move around. First of all, I would like just to contextualize what we are and why we are here. You know that the University of Deusto is one of the universities that started these Tuning Africa projects, where we not only join many of you working in the harmonization and the comparability of curriculums in areas such as mechanical and civil engineering that we mentioned before, such as agriculture, teacher education, and many others. Okay, we have been working in those areas, but we haven't been working in peace and security areas, and that's why we are very happy to have the chance to recover these previous works and to go ahead with them. So first of all, as I mentioned, I would like just to introduce what we are. We are the oldest not public university in Spain. We are in the north part of Spain, quite close to the border with France, here in a very cold place compared to other parts of the country. Okay, and a very industrial part of the country where our university started up back in 1986. So we are over 130 years old, so we are quite an old university that has been from the very beginning working in the humanitarian knowledge areas since we started precisely providing to the industry that was starting up here in the Basque Country a humanitarian approach to the management of the companies that were being created in those times. So we have lived huge transformation. This is a picture that we have in our Instagram profile that I usually use in my presentations to show where we are, where exactly in a city, in the city of Bilbao, that has suffered a huge transformations in the last 30 years. We used to be an industrial city, as you see here, with these big factories. And right now that we are in the middle of a new transformation, we are a service city. And in this last year, something that we have learned is that the world is changing. And that's why, as my colleague Sergio mentioned before, our lima, our motto for the new strategic plan is that we need to transform our world, but together. As Utibe Abasim said before, our collaborative and cooperative approach in our tuning projects is based on these ideas that we need to be transforming ourselves and to moving ahead, but in a collaborative way. And that's why our university has done in the last years some important projects in the area. I would like to share with you some basic ones, some basic ideas on them. The first one is prior to the coronavirus outbreak, we organized the first Peace and Justice International Forum in collaboration with Times Higher Education, that is a close partner of our university. We organized the first international forum at the University of Deusto here in Bilbao because we wanted to gather academics and stakeholders to discuss how important is going to be this issue in order to build a better world in the coming decades. And that's why our university, if we compare it in the general rankings, we always like to emphasize that we like to be ranked in the Sustainable Development Goals, especially in the 16th one, the Peace, Justice, and Strong Institutions indicator, because that's our mission in the coming years, to be engaged with our partner institutions and our partner universities in order to be able to move our country to a better dimension, to a better place. We are right now the number 20 in the world in this ranking in peace, justice, and strong institutions, and that's a message of how we see this knowledge area. Okay, and apart from that, I would like just prior to start the presentation of what we think at Deusto, that we can be working together, I would like to show you some trends in higher education. The first one is that the number of students in higher education is going to continue increasing a lot in the coming years, mainly because of the international dimension. And that's why I would like to show you that the world is increasing also the number of universities that are trying to answer to this demand, this increasing demand. In this is a graph that I usually show to represent this idea that the number of universities is increasing, and that's an answer to that increasing trend of people that is enrolling in higher education. Higher education is becoming the best answer for many of the complex challenges that we have in our world in the coming years. And apart from the increasing number of students in higher education, the second biggest trend is how we teach, how we try to develop the competences of our students. If we think on how we have been teaching since the very beginning, since the ancient Greece, we haven't changed in many of our teaching and learning processes. We still go to the classes, we stand up face to face with our students, and we start speaking. And that's why there is a huge trend also that is starting to raise the awareness on if this is the best way of teaching for the challenges that we are going to face in the coming years. And that's why some 20, 25 years ago, many academics in the world started to think on competences as a way to change some of the patterns, some of the practices that we have been using. Indeed, the transformation of the world is provoking that, for example, in some countries, the skills and competences that are starting to be flat are those that are routine, and those ones that are non-routine, I mean, those tasks that aren't repetitive are the ones that are starting to become the new normality. And that's why here at the University of Deusto and in our tuning projects, we always think on competences. Indeed, what we have been discussing before about how we have worked in the Tuning Africa projects is to list all the generic and subject-specific competences that we usually try to find for any context, in this case in Africa, that any project need. And that's what we do, to find the competences that we need to develop within our students in order to answer in the future to the complex issues that we are going to face in our societies. In this case, for peace and security in Africa. And that's why at the University of Deusto, more than 20 years ago, we changed all our learning model, all our educational model, and we introduced the competences, and we changed the approach from a professor-centered teaching to a student-centered teaching. And that's why I have started this brief presentation explaining that the paradigm is changing. We need to start thinking on the competence development made by our students. That's what happened in Europe in general 20 years ago, and that's what we have been working in the last 8 years in the Tuning Africa projects with some of the institutions that are already here. And that's why we like to sum up what we do in the tuning projects with some specific steps. And I am going to end up this presentation explaining some of the specific elements that we think we should be start discussing in order to move ahead with this agenda that we have been discussing this morning. The first one is which competences we think are important to be focused on in order to find the proper answers to the challenges that the peace issues are rising up in Africa. We normally speak about the instrumental, interpersonal, and systemic competences. We normally speak about those skills that are non-routinary that we need to help our students in order to be developing. So the first question that I think that we should be thinking on is on the competences that we should focus on in order to find the proper answers to the challenges that we have in Africa in this area. And the next element that we usually raise the attention on is on this slide. Something that some of you have already mentioned is that we need to focus on a multi-stakeholder approach, thinking on different point of views on how we should define that professional role. Let's think on the professional role for peace and security. And here we should be mixing up two different approaches. We should mix up that map of generic and subject-specific competences that we normally develop from the academic point of view, but we never have to forget that the professional roles that these students are supposed to be developing in the future is another important point of view. So here, the next step that we think is important to discuss is which are that professional roles, which are the contextual roles that these people, that these future roles should be developing in order to be able to answer to that questions. And that's why you have mentioned the learning outcomes. You know that these competences are usually assessed based on the learning outcomes that our students are supposed to be getting to. And we know that in order to arrive to those learning outcomes, we should be thinking on the knowledge and skills we should provide to those students, and those knowledge and skills that should be assessed in a proper way also in order to build that meta profile from our students. This is part of what we call the tuning methodology, and this is part of what we have been doing in the last 20-25 years in more than 140 countries already. So that's why we are very proud always to be able to share with you our approach, because this is a very, as you see, open way of listening to the societies, listening to all the stakeholders, and to define the competences and learning outcomes consequently. And this is the third main step that we usually work in the projects. After having defined the meta profile, I mean that set of competences and that those learning outcomes that are the consequence of developing those competences, we should start thinking on the curriculum. We should start thinking on the modules. Which are the knowledge, which are the skills, which are the different contents that our students are supposed to learn in order to get to those competences. So as you see, this is a multi-step process where it is quite important to respect the order. So we cannot start thinking on the modules, on the contents, if we haven't, first of all, defined the competences, and we cannot start thinking on the competences if we haven't defined prior to all the other elements that meta profile, that role that our students are going to be developing in the future. So as you see, this is the educational shift, the change of the educational paradigm that here in Europe we have suffered and we have been living with for the last 25 years. And this is what we think is a very first starting point for the discussion that we should have, obviously, with you. And we should be discussing in a very deep way with all you, because in order to define the future curriculum, it is important to get all the feelings, to get all the point of views of all the stakeholders that we have mentioned before. So why this methodology has worked quite well in the last 25 years, and why many different parts of the world have been always quite interested in this approach. Because if we define a comparable, compatible, and transferable curriculum, we are going to be able to provide to your students and to your citizens the possibility to exchange curriculum with other institutions all over the world. And that's something quite important related to one of the trends that I have stressed out at the beginning of my presentation. The world is becoming international. I guess that this pandemic is just an example of how international we are, how far we move in our everyday life. And we know that if we want to provide to our African students that international opportunities, we know that we need to provide them also the possibility to join these comparable, compatible, and transferable curriculums. I mean, those curriculums where we can exchange one piece of it with another university that could be in Washington, D.C., in Brussels, in Addis Ababa, in Lima, or in Manila, wherever it is. It doesn't matter, because that's why many institutions all over the world are becoming quite interested in this standardized way of defining the curriculum, because in that way we are going to be able to provide our students what we call joint and dual degrees. And this is another important element of this approach of getting to standardized curriculums, that we could eventually be combining African curriculums with curriculums all over the world. And let's imagine a young woman in Lagos or a young man in Harare that could be thinking on ending up its studies in anywhere in the world, because she or he is starting up a study in Africa, but that can be combined with other ones anywhere in the world. That's the term transferable. And that's what we call in many different parts of the world the transferability of the credits. Because if we define that harmonization of the curriculum, we are going to be able to discuss opportunities with many different parts. And let's imagine in Africa. And as you see, this is a map that I have extracted from Brooklyn's Institute of Education on how these standardized curriculums are starting to cross over the world. And as you see, we need to work in Africa because there aren't many joint and dual degrees with universities in different parts of the world. And that's why we think, with our humble point of view as the University of Deusto, that we have a very interesting opportunity to lead all over the world peace and security studies from Africa, because obviously that's, again, an international opportunity, an international awareness. But I think these peace and security studies haven't been worked a lot in different parts of the world. And that's why we think we have a huge opportunity to start this innovative approach from Africa, and afterwards start combining it with other parts in the world, because obviously that Africa can lead also that task. And just to end up this short presentation, let me show you that we also need to think on the assessment of those competences. This is another international trend. That's something that we are working on also in some of our tuning projects, because the competences not only must be defined, the competences, the curriculum must also be assessed. And the assessment of competences is, again, a very challenging task, where we need to define some new elements, and something that we will also be very happy to discuss with you, because the assessment of peace and security competences is going to be, again, a very challenging task, but again, is a very hot issue in the educational research area, because many people in the world are discussing how to do this point, how we could, from that challenge, get to what we call enriched rubrics, to get and to define those assessment techniques, those assessment tools that could standardize the way of assessing the competences. as I said before, the competences not only must be defined, but also assessed. And many universities do usually forget this point. They usually focus only on the definition, and afterwards, our teachers are going to have, and they are going to struggle with the assessment part, because that's a very complex issue, as I am mentioning. So thank you to all you for your time. I know that you are writing in the comments that you would like to have the presentation. I have already shared with our colleague Rubijat, so you will get the slides with all the details. So do not worry, because you will have all these details. Thank you so much, and I give the floor back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for this very comprehensive, at the same time very insightful presentation. Indeed, Alex, that's absolutely excellent. I'm sure the audience, the distinguished audience, have captured most of the points, and they might also like to raise questions and comments. As we were discussing this alignment aspect, and of course also performing marriage of convenience, it's also better to know the background of IPSS very briefly, just in 1 or 2 minutes. IPSS, Peace and Security Institute, was established in 2007 in response to growing difficulties, particularly peace and security challenges in Africa today. So it has 4 pillars. Pillar 1 is peace education. That is 3 masters and 2 PhDs that focus on both theoretical and empirical aspects as well. The second one is peace research, which is applied as well as policy, and sometimes in basic research as well. And 1 PhD program and another MA program, these are jointly run with University of Leipzig, so as to narrow down the global north, global south knowledge gap, and also research instrument gap as well. And the third pillar we have is community outreach. This community outreach or community engagement for us is walking the talk. Earlier, the keynote speaker mentioned time and again. This time, it is also under a very huge rubrics of the university called University Industry Link. That is making knowledge work for the good of society. So not only simply theoretically be well aware, well articulated, but also transforms that what they have learned into action in order to solve problems of the society. Now, if we just happen to see this industry university link, if you go to just Black Lion Hospital students, public health students, ourselves here, most of them, of course, getting engaged in this coronavirus awareness and also manufacturing sanitizers and many others that are very much required by society. So this interaction is just going on as we speak out, which is part of community engagement or community outreach. And under this community outreach, particularly when we focus peace and security aspect, we have what we call Ghana High-Level Security Forum on African Security, which takes place every year in Bahadar, which is about 700 kilometers away from Addis, where African as well as beyond African leaders come together and discuss the way forward, making those knowledge of peace and the research of peace work and be discussed with the leaders at the same time. And there's a lead, and the leaders come face to face in less protocol-oriented, but more informal and sometimes even didactic way of asking questions, engaging directly with their leaders, asking how to resolve conflicts here and there. So these are part of community outreach. And the fourth pillar is policy dialogue, which is very similar to the TANA Forum, but the difference is it takes place every 2 months at the auspices of Addis Ababa University, IPSS here. And in it, we also gauge the knowledge level, the engagement level, and every two months, we have this action research, applied research to be discussed with policymakers, with diplomats in Addis, with African Union, and of course with many others. So these are just what are being done by IPSS, which could squarely fit with, of course, those explanation of the curriculum as well. So after just this very brief introduction, or at least exploration of what's being done in IPSS, I'll then come to invite questions and comments from this distinguished audience. Maybe if I just start my question here. I've been with interest listening to the curriculum alignment aspect, and even those gold standard way of saying a student with MA can have equal course in Manila or in Addis Ababa or anywhere else, given if they are taking these courses together in peace and security. But these two, the tension we have here is most education philosophy, they say, in Africa are almost replica, copy of the Western-oriented, Western paradigm, Western epistemology. They are not oriented, they are not addressing the grassroots level questions, because the very philosophy of education is exported one, and it's an imported one from outside. It doesn't reflect what is going on. It is not contextualized. It is not context sensitive, because you don't have African epistemology, which deals with Africa's problem. So how can we reconcile these two very important issues? Definitely we like to have the global gap narrowed, that is global north and global south. Let's narrow that knowledge gap, that digital divide gap. But at the same time, how can we make, as we align this curriculum, sensitive to the context, address peace and security issues in Africa? I had an excellent experience with a French-based policy dialogue forum, where we had to discuss about discuss COVID situations. My first proposal was that this stay home doesn't work for Africa. That was in March, in February. This stay at home is for West and for those who have. In Africa, if you don't go out on daily basis, you will die both ways, either by as a result of hunger because you are not working, or by just facing, if you don't take care, then you might be also dying out of COVID. So the best way is really reflecting the environment. And they agreed, finally, we had to change. So this context sensitivity, at the same time aligning with global knowledge level, how are we going to reconcile these two tensions that are apparently there? Then other questions I'm sure will come out either in chat rooms or voice-made as well, voice-based as well. So feel free. Alex, if my question makes sense, I give you a chance, or also others can come in there.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jonas. That is a really, really interesting point, this one. So I am really happy to have this conversation, and that's why, as you may have realized, I have been stressing out a lot the importance to listen to the local society and to the local context. And that's why all our projects start on the conversation with all the stakeholders that do have something to do in the local context. So from our humble point of view, that what you mentioned and the metaphor that you have used for the stay-at-home movement also illustrates that idea. Same has happened with all our colleagues in Latin America. For example, just to stress out that point, in Latin America, they cannot stay at home either. And with them, we have also been working on that contra-movement to the traditional European and North American ideas that that's the best way to solve all the issues. So we really feel so comfortable on that idea of adapting our projects to the local contexts. So thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. If there's any additional comment or questions, I would be very delighted to accept a question. While we have discussed That comes from, yes, sure. While we have discussed harmonization for full degrees, what happens to the institutions who don't specifically have a degree, but have courses in peace and security? That's from Victor. Thank you, Victor, for that very interesting question. Yes, so Alex, I think it's addressed also to the previous speakers as well. So please, they can come in. Feel free to intervene. Sure. Yes, I can. Please do it. Go ahead. Excellent.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, because there seem to be a number of different agendas that I'm picking up here in this meeting. And so we do need to go to, and I'm sorry I missed the first presentation. What is it that we're actually trying to do here? Because on the one hand, I thought it was about how we in Africa doing peace and security could better organize ourselves, harmonize our degrees in support of the CISA framework. And I'm also hearing a more global agenda of harmonization, so that we can have twinning of universities, dual degrees, etc. Something that I think we should first start at home. And I'm not saying these are mutually exclusive agendas. I'm just trying to establish what exactly is it that we're trying to do and why. So you started off with the more critical questions of how do we use our education to obtain the better life, the good life for people in Africa and more globally. And I'm hearing a more kind of technocratic approach. So these are the kinds of competencies we need, etc. And I'm wondering, how do we align that need for critical thinking, etc., with the more standardization of the kinds of competency, skills, etc., we should be developing in our students?
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. So that adds into the conversation. And I think that is very, very crucial point, to be honest. Number one, clearly identifying what are we after now. Secondly, where are specifically, because we seem to be, seriously speaking, we are observing currently lack of critical thinking, this reflective thinking aspect in the very education system. As a result, you can see what's happening globally, not only in Africa, even globally, to be honest. Racism, for instance, I think we don't have to hide it away. What's been got this Black Lives Matters, for instance, you have educated people just getting, rather than thinking from the other aspect. Education is not coming to answer, to at least appeal to people's heart and mind. It's just there for sake of degree. But in our alignments, where do we leave that gap, particularly of a critical thinking aspect? And I think that is very important, reflective as a question. So going beyond the technocratic questions, I think going into the humanistic aspect, into the ethical aspect, into this philosophy of science as a particular, this critical thinking aspect, I think that is extremely important point for us to take into account. Any other comment or question? I think that's really lovely, to be honest. Do I see any comments or questions coming? I don't see them here, but yes, Alex, please. Yes.
Yeah, Jonas, excuse me, but we have here a very interesting question from Victor Chuma.
Yeah, sure.
It has written in the chat, so and he's very right, because we have been discussing on the traditional degrees, but what happens with the, let's call them non-curricularized courses. And that's a very interesting point, since obviously, since we are a university, I have been stressing more the traditional bachelor and master and PhD cycle. But obviously that this harmonization can also be done to the lifelong learning courses. Indeed, that's something that I usually also stress out. I think that the world is going to be demanding the lifelong learning courses more in the coming years, because obviously that our knowledge is becoming obsolete faster than ever in our history, because the world is going so fast, and I think that we need to be re-skilling ourselves more and more times. There is a very interesting book that I really recommend to all you that is called The 100 Years Life. In that book, the authors speak a lot on this point, because you know that in all the societies we are getting older in general in the world. The medicine is improving so fast. Our lives are becoming better than ever. So obviously that we are going to live more than ever. And that's why our working lifespan is going to become longer. And that's why lifelong learning courses, the re-skilling courses, are going to become the new normality in many universities. And that's why, obviously, that all these issues also apply to those courses. And that's why here at the University of Deusto, at least, we are launching many courses also for not the traditional young students, but also to that people that is from 30 to 60, more or less, where their knowledge is starting to be not very aligned with the challenges that he or she has for its everyday life. So thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for that very interesting response, or how that non-degree courses, particularly this lifelong learning, and it is necessity as well. I think that's really, I would say that is very innovative approach as well. It's been there, but now I think we have to see from our generation, our century, which is 21st century, that requires us to be always up to date. Excellent indeed. There's also another question coming, also for Professor Hendrik. I would like to ask about how broad the subject areas are that we include. For example, will there be a need to distinguish between defense-related universities and their notion of security versus other higher education institutions who don't have the same adversarial orientation? What about the faith-based institutions with their degrees that focus on a faith-based notion of peace? Victor, thank you. That's yet another interesting question. This is mainly focused or addressed to Professor Hendricks. Prof, now it's your time. Back again.
Well, thank you for the question. I think I tried to raise it at least as an issue when I first presented that there are a number of different kinds of institutions. There are a number of different kinds of approaches and philosophies through which we come, so that harmonization or standardization of curricula is going to be quite challenging. It's not an easy process, and I don't even know whether it's such an advisable thing to do. I'm a kind of person for let 1,000 ideas blossom at the same time. But I do want to question this idea that defense institutions are not able to have a more human security-centered approach or engage in critical thinking. A lot of the questioning of what we're doing is coming through some of those defense-related courses, as opposed to the standard political science course. So yes, I agree with you that this will pose a challenge for the way in which we do things. But I don't think what is being suggested here is that at every institution we teach exactly the same thing. That is too prescriptive. It can never be the case.
Thank you, Professor, indeed. By the way, luckily, I had to get engaged with the Defense Academy, both in Great Britain and in Ethiopia as well. And they try to tune in line with the human security aspect. And if you happen to see their curricula, they are not focusing only on the state security, high security alone, but through particularly the peacekeeping, which is now no more peacekeeping, but peace support operation, where you have multi-dimensional peace aspects that focuses on human security, on even election areas, even helping and even the water. So there are so many human security elements coming into the military studies as well. And I'm sure you know, after the end of the Cold War, the military itself is to be overseen by civilians, and so this civil military relationship is becoming very much blurred, as Alex was telling us earlier, how knowledge is really fast changing. So we should not really go the way that the military are still in the military science no more. They also are mixing up, otherwise, you know, they will disappear like dinosaur from the face of the earth unless they adapt to what's going on the planet to die here. So if you see environmental security, because I have already a curriculum here that we have been devising with the defense, both in UK and also in Ethiopia. So seriously speaking, you have this change as well. I couldn't agree more with Prof. Benedict. Thank you so much. Indeed, Hendricks. Thank you so much. Great. Any additional point or any question coming? I see one. If I may add something on this. Yes, please go ahead, Sergio, please. Yes.
Thank you, Jonas. I just wanted to add something to what Professor Hendricks has said about raising this very important question about critical thinking, right? And I totally agree with what she has said about not giving the same lessons or sharing exactly the same materials. That could be impossible. That couldn't be fruitful. But for me, what it is very important is to, as I have mentioned in my presentation, to share this critical security studies perspective, to try to incorporate a more comprehensive approach, to try to overcome those very narrow traditional agendas on security, which are just focusing on the main issues coming from the Cold War, and in certain way, this kind of environment to share these debates and theoretical approaches could be fostered, in my personal opinion, thanks to share research projects, share publications, and also staff mobility. So in my perspective, there are two different elements working at the same time. On one hand, we have all this idea about the curricula and lessons and how is teaching being made in different institutions, but in order to generate the same coherent environment to work together, those staff mobilities, shared publications, academic debates are needed in order to work together and generate a certain theoretical body or some kind of convergent way of understanding peace and security. So I totally agree on the importance of this, but I think that it has to be tackled from many different aspects. It is not just that we have to be critical, that's great. It is how we do it. And in order to do that, we have to work together, we have to research together, we have to write papers together, and also to have the possibility to travel abroad and, well, to share this expertise. But, well, I just wanted to reinforce this idea that I totally agree on. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. There are also some comments made by Erin, and you can just see there is not questions to be raised, but it's very important reflection which she added. That's absolutely fantastic. And if there is any additional reflection before I move on to other questions. Okay, then there is from Erin, it says the question about full program versus those with streams in other program is important. What is possible in the latter is much more limited, but inevitable as the discipline grows. The focus is also shaped by national policy orientation and priorities. Professor Hendricks raised an important point in her talk about the alignment with government departments. This is a critical issue to reflect upon, as this can shift emphasis away from the critical and philosophical and towards more of the technical aspect. Maybe any comment on the comments? I'd be very happy to hear that. I hope the comment really makes sense. It's quite interesting one, but if there is any additional comment to reflect upon that comment, which is, Professor comes to you if you like to be honest, Professor Hendricks.
Yeah, I think Erin is just reinforcing a point that I try to make, which is that universities have a much broader agenda. It cannot be simply about policy formulation and implementation, etc. That here is where the kinds of questioning about the state, about governance, etc. Those more philosophical questions need to take place. A point that I didn't raise in my talk, because I kind of skipped through half of it, but I always indicate that when we're looking at violent extremism, for example, our whole approach has been, how do we stop violent extremism through all of these militarized approaches, and then a counter approach, well, we need to focus more on development, etc. But what we're not looking at is some of the other things coming through, which is a questioning around the nation state and borders and this broader idea of statehood. It's about nation and belonging, etc. And we're not raising those kinds of issues. And so I guess that was partly also what I wanted to say. And universities, more than training institutions, are the ones that will raise those particular questions. And yes, Sergio, it's not around just saying we need to be critical. It is why I mentioned the need for how we organize ourselves that become important. Because without like-minded people getting together and doing the things that are required, we simply chat boxes all the time.
Thank you so much indeed. Thank you. I'm still expecting more questions yet to come, if there are some, or reflection, because I will have one practical question later on. So let me give you more chance on that. I'll call you back, sir. I'll call you back. Thank you very much indeed. Oh, any questions, any comments? I don't see them chat room here. Right, so turning higher education for Africa's peace and security agenda. This is a theme we have. And we raised the background, the interest, the focus areas as well. So then one pragmatic person might ask, so what's the next then? Okay, we have known each other already. What's the next practical step that we're going to do together? So if this comes to us, how are we going to respond to this? Practical aspect. Either Sergio, Alex, or Prof. Hendricks, any one of you? Yes.
I wonder if we can't get some guidance from the Commissioner Agbo, on how she would like us to organize.
Absolutely, yes, indeed.
In support of her. And then maybe from Alex also, how do we take this forward in more practical way?
Yes. Excellency.
Excellency needs to unmute.
Yes, could you just unmute, please? Unmute yourself.
Have unmuted myself.
Excellent. Thank you so much indeed. Thank you. Lovely.
Thank you very much. It's been very interesting listening to each of the speakers. And I want to say that Dr. Jonas, you actually brought in the real experts of the subject. I was on a learning phase. I was learning from them because this is not my field. So having said that, when I looked at the concept note and under the section outcome, one of the first priority area I saw there was that we need to pave the way for institutional convergence. At the very least, on the core fundamental to be expected in the degree profiles of programs offering peace and security related studies in Africa. And the question is, how do we move forward? Now that we've known ourselves, how do we move forward? I think there is a need for another conference, but this one on the practicalities, on how actually we can do tuning higher education for Africa's peace and security agenda. And in this wise, I would advise that we invite the AAU, the Association of African Universities, which is at the level of the rectors. Because here we have the vice chancellors and the rectors. It is their meeting, the African Association of African Universities, so that some of these vice chancellors or institutional heads can come in and see the way we need to integrate peace and security studies in our curriculum. I mentioned it, and some other person did mention it there, that it should become like a compulsory course, a compulsory module for every student across the field to be able to do this. But how do we implement it? Because we are speaking about walking the talk. Here we've met in a small number to think about how we move forward. And of course, the Institute of Peace and Security Studies is known all over Africa. I did mention the different areas in which we're already doing tuning based on regional levels. But this aspect of peace and security cannot be done at regional level. It must be done continentally. And therefore, it must be found in regional and national institutions. So it's very important. And then one other thing I saw at the outcome, which I agree can be the way forward, is organizing a training workshop on tuning degree profiles on peace and security via the University of Deutsche and IPSS, where we'll feature higher education institutions from across the continent. And this is where I can help you, Dr. Jonas, that we write a joint letter inviting the president of the Association of African Universities to call in the other universities to join in this particular section that we're going to do. So I believe that in conceiving this and in the various outcomes that you've written, I think it is the way that we should follow.
Excellent. That's fascinating, to be honest, and practical. So we'll see. We'll hammer on that as well. Thank you so very much indeed. I can't thank you enough indeed. Anyone else coming? I think I can see Prof's face. She seems to be thinking to join in. Because you have unmuted yourself as well, I can see. It's a circumstantial evidence is already there. I can also see Alex.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay, then Alex.
Thank you for giving me the floor, and thank you for this very interesting and enriching conversation. I am very happy to listen to this last intervention from the Excellency, from Sarah, because that's a very first step that I think that could start moving things ahead. If we organize that workshop in order to gather people to discuss those issues in a very structured way, where we can be discussing, to contextualizing, adapting all the things that we already know, but to the reality of the African context, I think that very specific activity could spark the light for bigger projects in the future. So we would be more than happy from the University of Deusto to provide you those activities. We are very happy to listen that they are not only the African Union, but also the Association of African Universities could join us, and obviously our close partners of the Institute for Peace and Security Studies. So yes, that's a very specific first activity where we can be working on in the coming days in order to move these things ahead in the last part of this year. I don't know if Dr. Jonas would like to add something on this point.
I might add 2 points. One is definitely what Her Excellency said is, I would say, directive how to go ahead. Just very, that ingenuity, that excellent insight, I think is very helpful. And Alex, I couldn't agree more with you, to be honest. And that is, I think we also can maybe, if you want, we can jointly invite AAU as well. Or it's quite possible. We also have African Union already together. So I think that makes it more practical. And there's a question, second one. Prof. Alex, is it also possible to standardize elective courses that can contribute to higher degrees in partnering university? I think that's quite interesting one. So that's the second point I want to raise with you. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, thank you, Jonas. Yes, that's a very technical question. I would say, because the electives are very specific courses where we should take care on how to define them and how to standardize them, because otherwise they are going to become very specific to the local need. So what we do with those selective courses is to select very generic competences. So let's think, for example, on problem solving. Problem solving, it's a very generic competence that can be worked with an elective course on, for example, agriculture in Zambia, or it can be working problem solving with some ICT issues on Cameroon. So what I mean is that elective courses must be defined using generic competences that can move from one specific context to other one. That's what I have called before the importance on the definition of the meta profile.
Thank you so much indeed. That is great. I'm sure my colleague Letty has heard it. It's quite interesting and very practical response, a practical question as well. Any final reflection? Any additional points? Do I see Sergio just talking of loud, thinking loud rather than just, I see him as if he's ready. Sergio, are you going to say something on that? On just any of the points we have, because I can see you on the forehead being prepared to say something, to make a comment.
No, sorry for moving my hands. No, I just dig into what Alex was saying. I think that on the proposals that the Excellency has made, I think they are very, very accurate. And yeah, from Deutsche, it would be a pleasure, as I mentioned in my presentation, some of the things that we could deliver as a way to add something to this collaboration, this initiative, consultative workshop. I mean, I think this is something that we are, in a certain way, we are used to do, and we are doing all our teaching year, this course on remote, or some of them. So we are very used to these kind of things, and it would be a pleasure to coordinate with you, Jonas, with the IPSS, and to be able to organize this together, and yeah, to move forward, right? I think that's why we are here, and that's the main interest of all of us. And I'm sure that we will be able to work together and to do something fruitful, practical, but at the same time critical. So it could be, as we have mentioned throughout the presentation, to transform together our society. That's what we are doing, right?
Absolutely, excellent. That's fascinating. Maybe if there is any final thought from all those distinguished speakers, I'll give you 30 seconds as finalizing, or sort of giving blessings, if you like. The last ones. Prof?
Okay, my last blessings to all you, and just ending up with a very big thank you again. It has been a big pleasure for us to be here with you. Thank you to all my colleagues and to all you. Our very best wishes for the coming days, fighting against this virus, and also greetings from our rector, from our president, Father Jose Maria Guibert, that would be more than happy to join us in the future sessions, because he is a person that is quite engaged with many things in Africa. So please be very welcome also to invite him to whatever it is. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so very much indeed. Thank you so much. Yes, I don't really have to put words on your mouth, but
yeah,
you like to.
For me, it's just to say once again, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure to be here with you. I look forward to the continued conversation and towards implementing some of the stuff. And everybody stay safe. And Sergio, please send me your presentation because I missed it.
Excellent. Yes, so thank you. Rubiat, who has been an engine of the entire program here, and our interim director, Letty Tambo, who has been organizing, who has been replacing me as well. Of course, while I was this engagement, community engagement of peace studies, peace building with Ministry of Peace and with House of Federation, with PMO, Prime Minister's Office, then she was there to come in so as to fight the fire. So I must thank them hugely. Also, IT people here who've been taking care of the entire communication. You might have noticed twice we went out of the from the connection because of light and some disconnection, but they made it happen at the same time. So huge thanks to them. And most important, these very distinguished fine minds of Africa in the world. And thank you so much, all of you indeed, particularly those who presented, particularly those who paid their attention into entire progress and process and interaction conversation. So let's keep the fire burning, not only the fire of here to get heat, but also the fire fighting with this COVID-19. And God bless us all wherever we are, and keep safe and well. Thank you so very much. Let's keep the conversation moving. Thank you so much again, and have a good day. Yeah. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.